1 second. Thank you. So anyway, come on, you can switch in. Oh, you have to leave early? Ah, forget you. Anyway, it's wonderful to see everybody. As always, we have great Torah. As always, our Torah will connect to the moment, and also I think to the journey of our lives. I just remind you, I didn't put back up the overview of the prism through which we're funneling Torah, but it starts, and it's all about, and you shall be a blessing. Excuse me, that's sort of our operative text this year, and we're sort of trying to funnel it through that prism, so that we start with the call or promise of the textual path. We then go to the purpose of the journey steps, which is the remez. We then go to how is the text echoing direction in an interpretive way, and eventually we get to the sod, which is the response or the call that we become because of that journey. We're starting in this week's parsha, Chayei Sara. Going to do something a little different, which is going to take the beginning and the end of the text. So we're not going to go straight through. We're going to put two pieces of text together, which I think will be telling. Mitzi, do you need a copy of something? You don't have a copy, right? So is there an extra copy right there? Comes in, yeah. So we have great Torah. We share in the blessing. Baruch atah
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen.
This is why I'm going to mute everybody on. Right? No, it's great. No, Steve Bartell is a great voice. Speaking voice, singing voice. He's great. Anyway, so we're going back to the beginning of the text, and we're going to see, and I could have done this, right? Do I have to do this myself, Raj, or can you do this? Can you bring it back to the beginning?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. No. Hey, listen, for all I'm paying the guy. So this is the call of the text for us. It's the start of it, and then it's the end of it, and it's really Sarah's end of life moments and Abraham's end of life moments. Wow. What is that teaching us about our life journey? And we'll get even more in depth. How does the death of those we love bring us back to life? And really, my sub-koshi is, how can our response to death be a call to life so that somehow we live on? So this is really a very sort of spiritual and important, question and challenge that we all deal with, no matter how old or young we are. Which is, so what is the legacy, and what specifically do Abraham and Sarah's end of life moments teach us? So we're going to start on this side, because I started on this side last time. So, but you read it. Go ahead, Mom. Go ahead.
Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life came to 127 years. Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, now Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham proceeded to mourn for Sarah and to bewail her. Then Abraham rose from beside his dead and spoke to the Hittites, saying, I am a resident alien among you. Tell me a burial site among you, that I may remove my dead for burial.
Right. If we went on, we would see, and we've done this, in chapter 23 before, we would see how Abraham establishes the land of Israel as home because he buys it. Quite literally, he pays the fair market or a very inflated price, right? According to Steve Shapiro, it was a ripoff. And it's really quite clear that it's about establishing the people of Israel in the land of Israel. We could do that. We're not doing that, right? So that's the beginning, and then we skip to again what happens. And Abraham buries his dead. The next thing he does, chapter 24, he says, "I've been blessed in all things, but my son doesn't have a wife. Go back to the old country, my servant Eliezer, so you don't become the inheritor of my family, and get a wife for my son." The whole chapter is about that. It's a long story. At the end of it, right? Rebecca falls off the camel, literally falls for Isaac. They marry, and Isaac finds comfort in this woman, and since the death of his mother. And then chapter 25, which is the parallel, in a way, bookends. Susan.
Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Joktan, Median, Ishbak, and Shua.
Yeah, you'll never hear these names anyplace else in the Torah, by the way. Quite telling.
Place else on the world.
Right.
Joshua begot Sheba and Dedan. Descendants of Dedan were Ashurim, the Tushim, and Lumen. The descendants of Midian were Ephan, Epher, Enoch, Abid, Edah. All these were descendants of Keturah. Abraham willed all that he owned to Isaac, but to Abraham's son by concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them away from his son Isaac eastward to the land of the east.
Right, so interesting. What do we hear? We hear and see that, Abraham, after Sarah dies, she's 127. I don't know what that is in human years today. I don't think it's 127. I think it's different calculation. Could have been half years. So was she, it could have been third years, right? So, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. She dies. Abraham continues living.
Can I ask a question?
Yep.
He said he gives gifts to his concubines, but he married Keturah, so these are his children.
That's a good shot question, and we're gonna come to it in a second, but so we're not, when we finish in a second, right? Then we're gonna come back to exactly that and a couple of other things. All right.
This was the total span of Abraham's life, 175 years. And Abraham breathed his last, dying at the good, ripe age, old and contented, and he was gathered to his kin. His sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in a cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar, the Hittite, facing Marni. The field that Abraham had bought from the Hittites, there Abraham was buried, and Sarah his wife. After the death of Abraham, God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac settled near
Be'er Lahai, right?
Yeah.
So on a shot level, right? Already the first question's been asked, which is, so wait a minute, did he marry this woman, or was she a concubine?
And then he says he's gathered to his kin. So are these kin or are they not?
Right, so let's have two very different questions. Let's question A, which we're gonna put all the questions out there as they relate to the key Koshi. So number one, so you're pointing out something. If you were was your hand up, Tom, or you were just drinking coffee? Okay. So what do we notice about the descriptions of the end of life of Abraham and Sarah? What's comparative? And I will tell you that this was the sheet that I gave out at HUC to teach fifth-year rabbinic students, which was a highlighted sheet just using the two verses of how they died. Because and I spent 40 minutes just doing that. So there is clearly a juxtaposition of deaths, but it teaches us about life.
Yeah.
So what do you notice about Sarah's death, Abraham's death? What's similar, what's different? Talk.
Well, they're all gathered to family again.
They're all gathered to family again, except
Or
doesn't say that about Sarah.
No.
Doesn't say that about Sarah. Says it about Abraham. Doesn't say it about Sarah. What else? Mike.
Well, after Sarah's death, sounds like Abraham went on to lead an active and good life.
Yeah, so he said, I'm not done. I'm going. So something about Sarah's death spurred Abraham on to continue. Did he marry again? Sounds like he had more kids. Were they the same as his other kids? Not quite. But again, family. All right, Virginia.
Yeah, two things. One is that he carefully sends the descendants of these concubines away. So there would not be any problems with the dynasty, so to speak. But the second thing is that that Ishmael is also there. His sons, Isaac and Ishmael, quite interesting. They are together again.
So at the end of his life, really good to note, the boys come back together to bury dad. right? They have a shiva, they get deli, you know, it's really that moment, right? So there's something very powerful about that. As opposed to who buries Sarah? The husband, Abraham. And we hear about his mourning, right? We didn't hear about, so, okay. What, anything else? Yeah, Jane.
It's interesting that it says he gave everything to Isaac, but he gave gifts to his sons. And I was interested in that distinction because in later times, want to call it that, in Europe particularly, anything that was inherited by the eldest son, and the younger sons maybe got stuff or maybe they didn't. So this apparently is something that went down through the centuries.
It starts in Hammurabi's code. So that's what we see it. In fact, Nachum Sarna says, it gives it the chapter and it's section 127. It's the same number of years, that's why I remember it. But literally, this is a Hammurabi code thing where, listen, if you have a first person, a first wife, a partner, you have kids, right? Your second, set of family, you say, I'm gonna give them notice gifts while he's still living. Let me take care of these kids so they don't make it simus and try to get a lawyer to, so, right, Susan, and then Lisa.
Sarah's lifetime, the span of Sarah's life starts with that. So
Yeah.
it's talking about something that, she may have had a rich life, even though she had so much service in her lifetime. There's something there that says.
Beautiful.
There was something more.
Beautiful. Clearly, you've studied this portion before, but yes, Lisa.
This is something different from the question, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so, it's sort of, here, God is blessing Isaac, which is the second son, and it's like, a sort of a reminder of Isaac blessing Jacob, the second son.
Yeah, yes. Well, you're noting something that happens in every single generation, which is even though the first son is supposed to be the one who inherits, the second child inherits in every generation of Israel.
And also just interesting that God is the one doing it in this one.
God is the one doing
The blessing of this one.
where?
God blessed his son Isaac.
Oh, yeah, after the death of the son. Yeah. So somehow it is divine. Somehow it's divine. I'm gonna call him Michael and then Harry and then Phil.
Okay, I have a problem with Sarah. Rashi says the way it's formulated, her age when she dies, is to say that all her years were equal in goodness. And we're also told that she was one of the righteous. That's why even in death, she continues to live, to be alive. Yet Sarah is the person who tells Abraham to throw out Ishmael and Hagar. This doesn't seem to me to be the act of a righteous, or at least this is an act which surely would make that particular year not as equal in goodness as all the other years.
So Michael, you're so far into Remez and Drash. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, I stopped.
No, you read ahead, or Michael just knows the Rashi, which is possible, right? Because the Rashi is so.
I read the Rashi, but I've also been thinking about Sarah, of course. So, all right, you want me to stop? I'll stop.
No. I want you to do this. So your general or your focus point, which is important, which is, so wait a minute. So Sarah dies, and it gives us this description of her the end of her life. Doesn't tell us what it does about Abraham, but it implies that this is a death worthy of mention and worthy of note. If your death is noted in Torah with the years of that, that's something big.
Yeah.
Why is Sarah's death worthy of note? That's the question. And knowing what her behavior was, should we challenge that, or should we be surprised by that? Absolutely fair. Michael, you want to add something? Go ahead.
Well, particularly because of the enmity between the Arab nation and the Jewish nation. I mean, This is clear. And Ishmael was sent away. Ishmael returns for his father's burial along with Isaac, but there initially, and it is Sarah who says, get rid of that that concubine and that boy, stop him playing with my son. And
So we don't hear anything about Ishmael and Isaac when Sarah dies, do we? No, we don't. So again, I'm an upshot level still for another 3 minutes, right?
Okay.
Harry.
Well, I'll continue on the Sarah thing. So why do we think that Sarah and Abraham were together at this point when she died? So the text says Abraham came to mourn, right? And Abraham came to mourn.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
where was he exactly? The concubine, the usual interpretive rules, there's no time in Torah, so did he have this concubine while Sarah was still alive and these children?
Yeah.
Sort of an odd interjection in the text that they drop these people in, but it does come back in verse 5 to Isaac and to move to Remez. Sarah's still mad. I mean, she may have expelled Ishmael, not that that was not God's will, because we know Isaac was the favorite child, but to go and then sacrifice Isaac.
Yeah. So just to note what Harry's saying, if you take this in the chronological sweep of Torah, though there isn't necessarily chronology in Torah, the last thing we hear in chapter 22, remember, is, all right, Abraham's up on the mountain, Isaac somehow is spared, the ram, Abraham comes down, he returns to the kids, right, the lads at the base, we don't know where Isaac is, and then we hear Abraham's told that, that his brother had a kid. So maybe he went to the bris, and the next thing we hear, Sarah dies.
Right.
That's this Michud Parshiot, that's the juxtaposition of moments here. And so, did Sarah die angry? Did Sarah die disappointed? Did Sarah die because of, as one of the Midrashim says? Maybe. Philip.
But if that's the case, if she died because of that, then Isaac's 34 and he's not 14, which it seems like he would have been in the story.
Right.
But that wasn't what I was gonna mention. I have the most Peshat question.
Yeah, good.
Of anybody. I've always taken that statement, gathered to his kin, he was gathered to his kin, as either being like symbolic, like when you die, you go to your kin, or of a funeral. So I'm wondering.
Yeah, we're gonna get there in 1 second. Which is right. It's very important. I'm gonna call on Ellen, John quickly, and then Arnie before we go to a textual comb.
Can you hear me?
We hear you totally. Yep.
I just wanted to say that after the Akedah, the first thing we read is that Sarah dies. And it always seemed to me, Sarah was never told, so far as we know, anything about this. And then it happens. And the shock of it seemed to me just psychologically that the shock of this must have been profound. And in any of the artistic representations, there's sort of a little image of her in the background, as if, where is Sarah during that monumental moment in our scripture? She is missing, and then the next thing we hear, she dies. So it's very, very tragic and sad, it seems to me.
Yeah. Did she die as a result of? What's the connection? Again, but we hear at the beginning of our portion, she's dead. Her death and years are noted in an honorific sort of type of way. John.
Yeah, I'm sort of interested in where did Torah come from? And I thought there was some rabbinic commentary that suggested that she might have really been Hagar.
Yeah, there is we're going to have that commentary in a minute. Oh yes.
Okay. And then just as a point, that would connect with the last sentence where for some reason Isaac settles near Beer Lahai.
Be'er Lahai, the place where Hagar and Ishmael lived.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he got a condo next to his brother. Think about that. Think about what's going on here. Right? Arnie, last comment before we go to the
2 points.
comb of the text.
I find the whole concept of primogeniture troubling, to say the least.
Are you the second born?
It has nothing to do with merit or need. It has to do with the accidental birth. I find that troubling, and I'm glad we've gotten rid of it to some extent.
Yes.
And the second thing is this portion is so overtly sexist. It's troubling. When you look at it in terms of today, I mean, come on. Why is Sarah in a secondary role? She's done as much as Abraham, and it doesn't address that.
You know what? I don't think so. I'm going to show you why not. I think it's a point. I don't think so. I'm going to show you differently. So in a shot text, you don't have to go back. The description of Sarah's death opens by Yehiyu. The description of Abraham's death it opens by Elah. By Yehiyu is a code word that something bad is going to happen, or it's something, it's telling you something terrible. With Abraham, it doesn't have the same word. Then it says Chayei Sara, but about Abraham, it says Yemei Shnei Chayei Abraham. So the years, the days of the years of Abraham's life, Sarah's life, it says Sarah's lives. Then it gives us the numbers, 127, 175. And then it says at the end of Sarah's, Shnei Chayei Sarah, these are the years of Sarah's lives. About Abraham, the unique phrase, only to Abraham, is Asher Chai, that he lived. So something about his life is a model of he lived. And then we get nothing of the postscript. We get a whole postscript sentence, right? Vayikva, he breathed his last. Vayomot Abraham, and Abraham died. B'seva tova, at a ripe old age. Zakein v'saveya, full and contented, or old and contented. Vayasef elamav, and he was gathered to his kin. So we get almost a theological postscript after Abraham dies, none of it after Sarah dies. Interesting, right? So we're going to go with both of those. Go to the Remez. I'm not giving you any answers. I'm just pointing out all the questions. And now we're going to do the comparison. I may skip a little bit. We'll see. We'll see. First, we have Sarah's death. These are, and Michael already noted the commentary, right? Mitzi. The Rashi says Shana. Go ahead.
Shana is repeated at each stage of Sarah's life to teach that they were all equal in goodness.
Yeah, I don't know where Rashi lives, but right, but again, this is what they're trying to figure out. And then Rashi has another one. But why does it say 120 and 7? Because she was as innocent at 7 as she was at 20, and she was as beautiful at 20 as she was at 100. I swear to God, that's the commentary, right? Mitzi, give us Hadrash Bahayun, the next one.
Okay. How can anyone say that?
Yeah.
Sarah remained childless for 90 years and had so many other misfortunes. Wait.
And then so many other misfortunes, yeah.
The answer is that a person must thank God for the bad as well as the good. And as far as Sarah was concerned, whatever happened to her, even the worst of times, she considered it for the good.
So maybe she had a different life perspective. She was able to see even in the lousiest moments. I don't know. But she had a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Sarah had a lot. Every single chapter is Sarah either doing something, responding, right? Her husband gives her over to her harem, she says, sweep the concubine, and then, she says, what the hell did you do? You slept with the concubine.
You're making my point.
Right? Yeah. So go ahead. What do you say?
Barney's point.
Yeah.
The worst thing is she was childless. Oh my God, whose viewpoint is that?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Well, the worst thing for being childless is why? So in Near Ancient, in Near East, you get married to have a family and create the next generation. Sarah was somehow incapable, right, of that. Now, angels came to tell Sarah, no, you're going to have a kid, and she left. And so they named the kid Laughing Boy. Yitzchak. So it's quite telling that Sarah did not have an easy life. One more mission.
Okay. Why is Sarah's life divided into segments? To teach you that for the righteous, each time of life counts. Young or old, every day makes a life.
Yeah, so it's beautiful, right? So Midrash Hagadol, I don't know, I think it's 11th century. I gotta check, I don't remember. So we're told every single day contributes to a life. even a day when things aren't great.
Yep.
Even a day when the struggles, weigh you down.
Yes.
So maybe there's something of Sarah's life, but I would say this, the portion is not called Chayei Abraham, is it? It's called Chayei Sara. And thus I would say to you, do not look at the text through modern 21st century eyes and try to make value judgments. Hashtag me too. Oh, there is no hashtag me too in the text. It's not supposed to be. We will get to how the text in its own, without us trying to coerce it or manipulate it, connects to us. Right? I must be channeling a professor because I feel like somebody said that to me 40 years ago. But I probably tried to do the same thing Arnie did, right? It's probably Norman Cohen who said, Jeffrey.
Even in the worst of times, when friends are ill and people pass away, you have seeds of friends and family there helping. It's so wonderful and beautiful.
Yeah.
That makes a big difference.
Yeah, so now let's compare. We do hear about how Abraham is buried and how Sarah is buried. So there is a parallel there. So take a look. Abraham's the one. He comes literally in the Hebrew, it says, coming from who knows where, maybe the bris of his nephew. He came and it says, Lispod l'Sara b'livkota, to eulogize her and to cry for her. And believe kota is written with a small kaf, a small little letter in the middle. Michelle, go ahead. Philo, first century Egyptian philosopher.
The small letter kaf indicates that Abraham did not weep too much, since immoderate mourning is not fitting for the wise, who should not feel too sorry for restoring to God the precious deposit entrusted to them.
Right. So clearly, right, again, every commentator, brings her, sort of mindset and life perspective. This is saying, no. As the wise leader of a nation, he's not going to be, wailing, right? We hire somebody to do that, right? And so okay, that's maybe, but it says no. He's crying. He is clearly distraught. So Clearcar, 16th century says, go ahead, Michelle.
Weeping usually precedes the hesped eulogizing, because the overpowering force of grief dissipates with the passage of time. Hence, first comes the emotional outcry and then fond remembrance. In Sarah's case, however, the degree of loss, the absence of her presence, was felt more and more as the days passed. His weeping continues long after the eulogies are through.
I love this.
Yeah.
Love this, because he's trying to read the text. He's not coercing it. And he's saying, first he comes and talks about her, and then he's crying, and he's crying, and he's still crying. Right? Mourning doesn't have a time frame. We all know that, right? And so something about, who was I just talking to? Mara. I was just talking to Mara, and Mara's my dear friend, Rabbi Mara Nathan, famous rabbi from San Antonio. And we were talking, and she said, but you did your mother's funeral, right? And I said, yeah, I did. She said, must have been crazy hard. I said, it was hard, but there was really nobody else. Like, I didn't want the person there to do it. So I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I said, but doing it, I was able to do it and sort of feel like a rabbi. And then after it, I felt like, oh man, that's my mother. So same thing, right? As you get distance from it, you still feel terrible. In fact, maybe the weight of it all, you realize an actual, so I think that's what's going on here. But Norman Cohen, this is Norman, who I sat next to on Thursday at services. This is Norman. So Norman gives us something very, very important. Who's up? I don't know. Toby, go ahead.
The change in Abraham is evident in the great emotion he exhibits upon Sarah's death. Perhaps for the very first time in his life, he sheds tears for someone for whom he cares. The text here seems to be redundant. He came to mourn her, to mourn for her, and to cry for her. The writer goes out of his way to indicate that Abraham was deeply affected by the death, emphasized by the small knot. Abraham emotes as never before. Why did he grieve so exceedingly? Perhaps out of guilt over his failure, during her lifetime, or maybe because he came to realize how much he meant to him after all.
Yeah.
The irony is that Abraham came together with Sarah in death, as they never seemed to in life, buried next to each other in Machpelah.
Right, so what is it, what does it say? What does it say, Torah?
I'm probably a non-sequitur. Is this why people have family plots?
Yeah, listen, I think they have family plots because they're cheaper.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, you know, but I think that, yeah, I think that this is very telling for us. Yeah, my father-in-law, Bernard Paul, may he rest in peace, an amazingly righteous soul. You know, said, yeah, Jeff, you know, I bought 24 plots. I said, oh, okay, Dad, all right. He said, I got one for you next to, you know, Sis. I said, great. I thought, who buys 24 plots?
Wow.
I know why the same reason he bought 3 cases of tuna fish every time he went to the grocery. Because if he did that, and it was 69 cents a can, you just saved like $14, which didn't mean a damn thing to him, but he saved money. So I would say to you, yes. What is Norman saying to us? He came to realize how much she meant to him after all, which right, it bespeaks Harry's comment and John's question, which is, in his life and during her life, where did he spend most of his time? With God, fighting wars out there, doing, so I don't know, like, you know, he's on a lot of business trips. That Abraham, right? Jane, if it's quick.
So it just reminds me of the saying, nobody ever wanted to put on their gravestone, I wish I'd spent more time with you.
Yeah. Zebby, go ahead. I'm sorry, I missed you.
So, you know, what struck me as I was reading it is the geography. Because what plays out today in the politics is the geography of this text. It's the people killing each other. Machpelah, right? Didn't some guy go in with a machine gun and mow down God knows how many people? Remains, the geography remains. The people are forgotten, but the geography is still there and people are still killing about it.
Interesting, right? So in nowadays, it's the geography. In Torah days, it's the people.
Right.
The people mark the geography. So it's Chayei Sara. So we get this, the last little bit I'll just give you because I want to go on to the next piece, Mike's going to read in a minute, is that it says literally in the text, it doesn't say anything about this because they're both dead. It says, Vayakam Abraham me'al panei meto, and Abraham arose from before his death. But if you read the text midrashically, it says, and Abraham arose before the face of his death. Right? Sarah dies. Abraham says, uh-oh. I know what that means. So there's some sense of facing mortality that's impossible, you know, when a spouse, a partner, somebody else, you know, how can you not think that? And then we get to Abraham's end of life, right? That we hear. It's not an end of life. It's I'm still living. Yeah, so, you know, so where's John Borden? John, are you there? John, you have to read this. I'm not going to ask Mike to read this. I'm going to come back to it in a minute. So, yeah, go ahead. You read the first 2 comments, John. Wherein Abraham proceeded to take another wife, a woman whose name was Chevrah. She bore him all those names we're not going to say.
Right. Okay, Rashi. This was Hagar, so nicknamed because all her deeds were as fragrant as incense, Torah, delighting all around her.
Yeah, this is when you know the rabbis are like grasping at straws. What do you mean? Right? Her name was Chevrah, but maybe it was Hagar. There's other connections that it seems to be Hagar. The Midrash goes wild because it says Isaac and Ishmael conspired and went and got Hagar and brought her to Abraham. There's all kinds of great Midrashim here. So, you know, who is this and how is that possible? John, one more, the Abarvana.
Yeah. It is strange that Abraham would take another wife in his old age. No doubt this is what led the sages to say it was Hagar, which would make it less strange, almost natural. The Holy One prompted him, fulfilling, I will make nations of you.
Yeah, whose promise is that? That's God's promise to Hagar.
Right.
And so Abraham is the fulfillment of promises. That's part of his journey of many people. So maybe that's why they're saying it's Hagar. The rabbis, of course, are reading in their own sort of, sense of judgment and what's appropriate, what's proper. They're saying, well, if Abraham remarried, it probably, was probably the woman he slept with anybody before. He wouldn't be going out, and he's not going to singles club. It's just not Abraham, right?
There's also, the problem that surfaces with Isaac was, I don't want my son marrying one of the women of the land.
Yeah.
And that is a recurring theme. I don't want him marrying a local.
Yeah.
If you say Keturah, a woman who lived up the block, you have a problem there.
Yeah.
If you go ahead and say, hey, it's Hagar, it's just the flip side of where they started.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's some justification that, listen, if Abraham didn't want his son marrying, all the more so, is he gonna then, marry somebody from Poughkeepsie? I mean, seriously, right? So again, apologize to all those folks who are from Poughkeepsie.
Jeffrey.
All right. Yeah.
A quick question, but
Yeah.
doesn't this also imply that if she's Hagar, that Abraham really preferred her, even though Sarah was his first wife? I mean, that he maintained a relationship with her, then they had all these additional children. I mean, it seems to sort of undermine who is the primary love of Abraham's life.
Maybe, I mean, I think it certainly says that Abraham goes where he finds comfort and familiarity. It also says, I think that this is a very different Abraham than when Sarah lived. Something about Sarah's death changes Abraham drastically, almost. Take a look. So, do we need this between that? Don't worry about that. Go to verse 7 and 8, Mike. It starts with, so now these are the days of the years of Abraham's life, etc. So Radak tells us this is the sentence that's unique to Abraham. How did he die? Breathed his last. He died b'seva tova. What does this mean?
B'seva tova, at a good old age, for he lived to see his children and his twin grandchildren turn 15, treated with dignity and respect by them all his days. The Midrash adds, he lived to see his son Ishmael return as Baal
Teshuva, meaning he converted. He came back home. So again, what is the great gift? As Rav Soloveitchik says, it's to live to see your children become parents. That's the gift. That's the gift. So that's what it means that he was, that he was, how do they translate it here? A ripe old age. Right, so that's what a ripe old age means. All right, maybe. Take a look at the Ramban, which is the next phrase, Mike, which is Zakein v'Saveh, old and contented or fulfilled.
Abraham, no, go right ahead.
No, then Mike, go ahead. Mike, go ahead. Yeah, Mike, one more, and then we'll go to him.
Abraham lived to see all the desires of his heart fulfilled. This is the mark of the righteous, who are content with their lot, in contrast with those who are never satisfied.
So here's the irony. When you think of Abraham, do you feel like, oh, that's a guy who's content with his lot? No. Abraham spent his life chasing rainbows. He spent his life like arguing, not content, dissatisfied. What do you mean? You shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? Right? You mean I gotta take her and the kid and into the desert? Really? You want me to sacrifice my child? This is a man that's content. Every turn we see Abraham, he has sorrows and he's struggling with life. What?
But in the end, and the commentators seem to avoid it, God says your progeny will wind up being enslaved in Egypt for over 400 years.
Yeah.
But the text says he dies happy. It's either he has amnesia.
Yeah.
He doesn't care. Or at the end of it all, he basically says, the most I can control are the 4 cubits that surround me.
Love that. Love that. So what is, he's giving that's my drash here for sure. So what does it mean to be content, right? Satisfied, content, full of days. So what does that mean? it means to realize there are things beyond your control, right? You can't do it all. Do we need this last one? Such yeah, read the last one. Let Mike do this last one, then we're gonna skip to Harold. So this is Nachum Sarna. Zakein v'Savaya, old and contented. Go ahead, Mike.
Such a summation of a life is found with no other personality in biblical literature. The phrase describes not his longevity, but the quality of his earthly existence.
So something about by the end of his life, something about how he lives or how he approaches life makes him this unique phrase, old and contented. Dave.
Can I go back to Radak first?
Yeah, go ahead.
It says the Midrash adds, he lived to see his son Ishmael return to.
As a Baal Tshuva.
Right, so that's to convert back to whatever.
Yeah.
That Abraham.
Whatever that Abrahamic faith was.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's crazy. I mean, isn't Ishmael the considered like the beginnings of the Arab nation?
Of course. Listen.
So it can only be a midrash.
And that's a midrash. That's right.
Very, very wishful thinking.
Of course, it's extremely wishful thinking, and it's also they're trying to figure out. So, what does it mean to be a ripe old age? What does it mean to have that feeling of I've lived? So they're trying to. I think they're grasping at straws. I think it's much closer to what Lloyd, who's was saying, right? Harry than least.
Maybe we're reasoning it backwards. Old and contented. So this was not a life that we would describe as a contented life, but the Torah says it is. So maybe that is a contented life. And maybe what we think of being content is, yeah, everything's fine and we're all smooth. But maybe what the text is telling us, actually, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not a contented life is one where you are discontent. So
I love that.
I would just flip it.
So maybe they're redefining, or they're trying to give us a different view of what does that mean. Lisa, then I got to go to the text.
Maybe the content is somehow knowing that Isaac and Ishmael would come together again, and the gathering to the kin is not just being in the Machpelah, but also, his sons.
Yeah, that his sons came back to bury him. There's some sense of wow, I threw one out and tried to kill the other one, and they're still gonna bury me. Maybe, right? I want to go with this because Philip asked the question. So, and it says it, right? It says, Vayigvai breathed his last, he died. And then it says, Vayasef el Amav, and he was gathered to his kin. The Sforna, Harold.
Abraham was gathered into the bond of eternal life, attached to the bundle of souls which are the righteous of all generation, Amav, his people, because there are many different spiritual levels among the righteous. Not all attain the same level on earth, but all share in the joys of life eternal.
Right, of course. So this is medieval. It's like 14th century, and so they're developed already the nature of there's a life after this. Sense of eternity where all souls go, and since Ford is a philosopher as well, they're bundled all together, somehow connected to some transformative presence, which obviously means Sarah too, I think, right? Harold, give us the Hirsch because it's going to even underscore this. Remember, Samson Raphael Hirsch is a 19th century.
Do not take this literally. His relatives are buried in Mesopotamia. These words are a reference to Genesis 15:15, the immortality of the soul. For this is nothing other than the divine
Ruach
placed by God and into us, gathered back into God. Judaism without this conception is inconceivable. It was not until free-thinking sects attempted to deny the principle of immortality that it appeared necessary to teach it formally as a basic tenet in Judaism.
Yeah. Who, by the way, is Hirsch referring to when it says sects? That'd be us, by the way. That'd be reformers of the 19th century.
Reform.
Yeah, that'd be us. Right? So we're talking about, immortality of the soul. So somehow Abraham gets the send-off of affirming some theological or sense of afterlife on a spiritual plane. What?
the divide over the immortality of the soul goes
Way back.
way back.
Yeah,
I mean, the
yeah.
Sadducees had a problem with.
Yeah. So he could be referring to the Sadducees. I know he hated us, by the way.
What I'm getting at is the idea that the text is prospectively writing about at least two coming splits.
Yeah. So it's a deep dive or a real reach to be able to say, yeah, they're using this phrase. Interestingly, they're using it about Abraham uniquely. Okay, Jane, and then we're gonna go to Ellen, and then we're gonna go to the next section.
I'd like to go back to the died content thing.
Yeah.
Is because I think that the fact that he didn't have a contented life, but he died content because of what he managed not only to do with his life, but the fact that the end of his life was not nearly as turbulent as the beginning,
Yes.
the middle world.
Yes. No, I think that it borders on what Harry was saying as well. I'll give you the last little piece. Ishmael. So what does Rashi think? Rashi thinks Ishmael not alone repented, but let Isaac take precedence, like take up the shovel first. This is the good old age Abraham was promised. In other words, he knew in dying his family would be fine. Maybe. Ellen, and then we're going to go to Jonathan Sachs. Maybe a quick message.
I just wanted to add a quick note to the contentment at the end of Abraham's life. For me, the most inspiring moment in Abraham's life is when he argues with God about Sodom and Gomorrah. Maybe that is a way in which he expressed himself. And maybe at the end of your life, if you feel that during your life, you've really expressed yourself and done something or said something that you feel is true, this can give you a sense of contentment.
Yeah. Again, could be that, he's lived a life where he has tried his best, done his all, shared his spirit and his presence. Maybe, Missy.
Okay, so maybe this is related to that, with the commitments that maybe, I don't know if that's what she was saying or not, but that maybe he died content because he died fulfilled, knowing that he had done all that God had called him to do. So maybe his contentment was directly related to his relationship with God. In the New Testament, we talk about the Apostle Paul, and he led a horrible life. Yet he talks about, I fought the good fight.
Yeah.
Right.
So maybe it's fighting the good fight. Paul's name before he was Paul was
Saul.
Yeah. So you know what? He was a good Jew, man.
Yeah.
Right. So the idea of being content, I think Harry's point is well taken here, is let's not put maybe it's trying to reframe what it could mean. Jonathan Sachs is going to be helpful here. I should call in some people online. How about wait 1 sec, let's see who I don't always call on. How about Ned Greenberg and Stephen Bartell? You want to give us a little Jonathan Sachs?
Sure.
Ned, you start, then Stephen will pick up.
Okay, our Parsha contains the most serene description of old age and dying anywhere in the Torah. Then Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and full of years, and he was gathered to his people. There's an earlier version, no less moving. Abraham was old, well advanced in years, and God had blessed Abraham with everything. Nor was this serenity the gift of Abraham alone. Rashi was puzzled by the description of Sarah. Sarah lived to be 127 years old. These were the years of Sarah's life. The last phrase seems completely superfluous. Why not just tell us that Sarah lived in the age of 127? What was added by saying that these were the years of Sarah's life? Rashi is led to the conclusion that the first half of the verse talks about the quantity of her life, how long she lived, while the second tells us about the quality of her life. The years she lived, were all equal in goodness. Yet, how is any of this conceivable? Abraham and Sarah were commanded by God to leave everything that was familiar, their land, their home, their family, and travel to an unknown land.
Right, this is going to all make the point, right? So I'm going to for a variety of reasons. This is just telling us, right? Every step of their lives, was challenging, right? The last step, agonizing, right? As a couple people already said, you know, as Ellen said, maybe like that's why Sarah died here. She died of a broken heart. Give us for a variety of reasons for that paragraph, and then Steve will pick up. Go ahead, man.
No sooner had they arrived than they were forced to leave
No,
because
no,
of famine.
go skip down on that too.
Oh,
For a
I'm sorry.
variety of reasons. Yeah, the next
For a
paragraph.
variety of reasons, neither Abraham or Sarah had an easy life. Theirs were lives of trial in which their faith was tested at many points. How can Rashi say that all Sarah's years were equal in goodness? How can the Torah say that Abraham had been blessed with everything? The answer is given by the Parsha itself, and it's very unexpected. 7 times Abraham had been promised the land. Yet by the time Sarah dies, Abraham has no land at all, and he is forced to prostrate himself before the local Hittites and beg for permission to acquire even a single field with a cave in which to bury his wife. Even then, he has to pay what is clearly a massively inflated price, 400 silver shekels. This does not sound like a fulfillment of the promise of all the land, north, south, east, and west. Then in relation to in relation to children, Abraham is promised 4 times, I will make you into a great nation. Yet he had to wait so long for even a single son by Sarah that when God insisted that she would indeed have a son, both Abraham and Sarah laughed. One way or another, whether we think of children or the land, the 2 key divine promises to Abraham and Sarah, the reality fell far short of what they might have felt entitled to expect.
All right, Steve, go ahead.
That, however, is precisely the meaning and message of Chayei Chevrah. That in it, Abraham does 2 things. He buys the first plot in the land of Canaan, and he arranges for the marriage of Isaac. 1 field and a cave was, for Abraham, enough for the text to say that God had blessed Abraham with everything. 1 child, Isaac, by then married and with children. Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born. Isaac was 60 when the twins, Jacob and Esau, were born, and Abraham was 175 when he died. Was enough for Abraham to die in peace.
Now we get Lao Tzu.
Lao Tzu, the Chinese, shifting gears, Lao Tzu, the Chinese sage, said that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. To that, Judaism adds, it is not for you to complete the work, but neither are you free to desist from it. God himself said to Abraham, for I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him. The meaning of this is clear. If you ensure that your children will continue to live for what you have lived for, then you can have faith that they will continue your journey until eventually they reach the destination. Abraham did not need to see all the land in Jewish hands, nor did he need to see the Jewish people become numerous. He had taken the first step. He had begun the task, and he knew that his descendants would continue it. He was able to die serenely because he had faith in God and faith that others would complete what he had begun. The same is surely true of Sarah. To place your life in God's hands, to have faith that whatever happens to you happens for a reason, to know that you are part of a larger narrative, and to believe that others will continue what you began, is to achieve a satisfaction in life that cannot be destroyed by circumstance. Abraham and Sarah had that faith, and they were able to die with a sense of fulfillment.
Right, the next paragraph is actually going to be the reframing that Harry was looking for. Go ahead.
To be happy does not mean that you have everything you want or everything you were promised. It means simply to have done what you were called to do, to have made a beginning, and then to have passed on the baton to the next generations. The righteous, even in death, are regarded as though they are still alive. Wow. Because the righteous leave a living trace in those who come after them. That is enough for Abraham and Sarah, and it must be enough for us.
Great.
Yeah.
It's a hard
That's it right there.
to show up.
It's a hard text after the Shoah, of course. Now, the irony is, I do have a commentary. I don't know if I'm going to get to it, but there is an application of the Shoah after that, right? Yep.
Also, there's a problem with this. It's a polemic. And it doesn't put it straight. I don't, for what it's worth, there are problems with it when you compare it later in the text. It's basically the righteous content. Really? Jacob goes down to Egypt. Pharaoh goes, how old are you? And he doesn't ask, how are you? How old are you? And
He
his
says,
response is,
lousy and terrible have been the years of my life.
sojourn on earth are 130. Few and hard have been the years of my life, nor do they come up to the lifespans of my fathers during their sojourn. Really, the righteous are content. And before Jacob makes it to Egypt, he's down in Beersheba and he's offering sacrifices.
Yeah.
And God is coming to him and saying, you're going to be fine.
And he says, you call this fine?
That's what's going on here.
Right, right. So it's a struggle, right? First of all, struggle between generations, right? About, so am I okay? Have I answered the call? And it's really, why is my life so terrible? Why am I having such sorrows?
And in one case, it's Abraham goes, you know what, I've reached the point where it's time to just go with the flow. And in the other case, Jacob he's with his family. It's not as though they reunite after he's dead. He's seeing his son has been restored to him.
Seeing the fulfillment. Yep, he's seeing the fulfillment. And yet, right, Mike?
Just to say, I mean, in a way, there's something sort of, I guess, anti-revolutionary about this outlook, and that it's just accept your lot in life and just accept the status quo.
Yeah, which is an irony because he uses it as a proof text, Mike, what we did last week, right? It was last week, yeah, it was Chayei, which is, about Abraham's mission. For I have chosen him, singled him out, so that he'll direct his children to follow the way of Adonai by doing what is just and right. So that Adonai will bring about for Abraham what he's promised. So it's about embracing the mission, isn't it? It's about being the revolutionary, standing up against, right? So it seems, right? All right, take care, guys. Take care, John. I'm going to Baltimore. All right, Lisa, and then Jane.
I think
And then Ellen.
the struggle is that it seems easier to be content in life than content in death. Because when, the days before my parents died, it was, fighting it and difficult, and it didn't seem like contentment, even though the life was very contenting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So and again, I think you're underscoring what Abraham experienced when his wife died, which is I don't know, content. How do you being content? It's hard, especially when somebody you love is leaving you, right? So there's a void, an immense void. Abraham sort of filled the void, but found something else, right? I think.
I like very much, this reminds me very much of the story about the old man who's planting a tree and somebody comes up and says, why are you planting this tree? You'll never see it grow. And he said, I'm planting it for those that come after me. So I think it's very much two things, a question of faith, but also honor the past and prepare for the future. Because if you don't do that, then, then there's nothing.
Yeah. Ellen. You said unmute, Ellen. Just unmute. No, you're still muted, Ellen. It could be this. There you go.
I apologize. I just forgot to put my hand down.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Not a problem. Michelle.
I don't think you can have content without struggle. I mean, there has to be struggle, purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, and if for 3/4 of Abraham's life, that's what he does. That's how he defines his life. So, but something about Abraham changes, and something about his life approach changes. Maybe it takes a lot of struggle before he gets there. Virginia, then we're going to go with one more commentary.
Yeah, I'm wondering about the possibility of everybody having a very modern and romantic, of the sense of the 19th century idea of happiness. Until very, very recently, people never thought they were born to be happy. They were born to do exactly what Sachs says here, which is you have done what you were called on to do. That's enough. That's already a lot, and that's enough. Now, this idea of constant fulfillment and we are born and we're born to be happy is really very, very modern. And you know what? Mostly unfulfilled if you look at people's lives, I think.
All right, well, right, so maybe that the purpose of life is not to be happy. As Leo Roston says, the purpose of life is to matter. To have it make some difference that you have lived at all. Maybe. Let me give you Rona Shapiro, who's just so good, right? Mike, before
I
we do.
just wanted to add to Virginia's point. I mean, it's like just accept where you are in the great chain of being.
Yeah, it's not, and
It's not about being happy.
right, so maybe it's about, right, what does Zakein v'Savea mean? Is it old and contented? The word Savea is used in many places. In one of them is in the Birkat Hamazon, which says, I've never seen people go hungry. I've seen, and so, so maybe it's to live with a hope. So maybe it's about living with hope. We're gonna skip John Rossoff, the next one, the Sod, even though it's lovely, and it's really a statement about immortality. We'll come back to it maybe, but Rabbi Rona Shapiro, this is just an encapsulation. It's just a little bit of who's up? Steve, give us the first paragraph here, and then we'll go with Jay and Yanni.
All his life, Abraham was looking for truth on the mountaintop. Unsatisfied with the domesticity of everyday life, he seeked higher truth, transcendent meaning. Indeed, throughout the Abraham narrative, you see Abraham frustrated with domestic life. He's at his best arguing for justice over Sodom and Gomorrah. He is a failure, however, when it comes to meeting out justice at home, unable to deal with the conflict between Sara and Isaac, unable to act on the conflict between his sons. Sarah's death says there is no truth on the mountaintop, no special holiness up there. Truth is right here at home, cooking dinner, taking out the garbage, holding hands, raising a child. Sarah dies knowing that truth Abraham never learns. But following Sarah's death, they're on the mountaintops, no wars with kings, no dramatic moments. He buries his wife, words that his death his son, marries again himself. In fact, after the Akedah, Abraham does not speak to God again, but has become of Abraham.
Right. The fact that Steve's reading this, of course, right, is painful but beautiful, right? Because it's an underscoring of what it means to be a Chevrah Torah, which is just when we think the text is some ancient text, all of a sudden we're inside it. Right. So it's right, and I feel the same thing. Right. Go ahead, Jane. Give us this last bit. So what is it that Abraham, right? How does he change?
Perhaps this parsha is called Chayei Sara, the life of Sarah, because Sarah's death, Abraham.
Because with Sarah's death.
Because with Sarah's death, Abraham finally learns to live his life. He comes down from the mountaintop and becomes a man of the heart. He learns to find truth and meaning within the context of family, in marrying off his son, in raising children and grandkids, in the small acts of daily kindness that make life holy. With Sarah's death, Abraham is given a more humble, but ultimately more real, more human life. With her death, Abraham finally comes to understand and live Chayei Sara, a Sarah life.
So maybe it's a new perspective. Maybe it's a new perspective on what it means to be, filled with years. And by the way, I would say this: it doesn't mean you have to have, generations, and it means to find a place in the world, where, going with the flow, you can say, I'm somehow part of something bigger. Doing whatever I do, being whoever I am. So do I have the time to do this? Okay, we're gonna read part of Ed Farber only because Harold brought up the question. This happens to be, we're in the shadow of Kristallnacht, right? Kristallnacht, the night of broken glass. Last night of services, we had really an amazing service, beautiful reflections of folks who went to Prague and Poland, and we had a hidden the son of a hidden child, right? Craig Lance tell us the story. And so Ed Farber, who's a student of Rabbi Sachs, talks about how Rabbi Sachs understands this in the light of the Shoah, right? Hillary, do you want to go comment first, but before we jump in?
No, it's okay.
You gonna wait? Okay, all right, okay. Dave, give us, we're not gonna start at the beginning. He's just saying that it's been a year since Rabbi Sachs died. This is he wrote this on the anniversary of his death. And Rabbi Sachs died, by the way, on this portion. Right, when we look back at his life. Right, so let's go further. You're gonna skip down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 paragraphs.
Right, and I just wanted to say that, as a remembrance, Rose and Arthur Wolf were at Crystal.
Yeah.
Let's go further. The other promise to Abraham was that he would possess a land, the land of Canaan. But at the beginning of this week's parsha, Sara has died, and not only doesn't he possess a land, he doesn't even own a single square inch of territory in which to bury her. Imagine how painful that must have been for Abraham. On the surface, his life is one of disappointed hopes and delayed fulfillment, as described by Rabbi Sachs. The question, therefore, is, what kind of man was this, that the Torah can say that he died at an advanced age, old and satisfied? Rabbi Sachs draws then on his numerous experiences with Holocaust survivors, whose lives were far more challenged and disappointing than Abraham ever was. With the exception, I think, of the trial he underwent in being asked to sacrifice Yitzhak. He asked himself, how is it possible that these Holocaust survivors, who had lost most, if not all, of their families and everything that they had, who had endured horrors and unimaginable suffering at the hands of the Nazis, could forward and rebuild their lives? The conclusion is that when the war ended, most focused with single-minded intensity on the future, or if not on the future, then on the present, taking it day by day. Like Abraham, they were strangers in a strange land, and yet they were able to build homes and careers, marry and have children, and bringing new life into the world.
Just a little more, Dave, then we'll switch the talk.
In addition, Rabbi Sachs noted that most survivors did not talk about their experiences during the Shoah with anyone beyond other survivors. Their silence lasted in many cases for as long as 50 years. Only when the future was secure did survivors allow themselves to look back and bear witness to what they had suffered and seen.
All right, go ahead, Tom.
Some of them wrote books and many went around schools telling their stories so that the Holocaust could not be denied. But as Rabbi Sachs points out so astutely, they did not allow themselves to do that until they had first built their future. First, they built their future. Only then did they allow themselves to remember the past. That is what Abraham did in this parasha. Rabbi Sachs points out that at the age of 137, Abraham had one unmarried son, no land, and had fathered no nation, as far as he could discern. Yet he uttered not a single word of complaint. Instead, he acted. He bought a burial site for Sarah and the family, set out to make his son Isaac marry and continue the family. Abraham realized that God wanted him to act, not to complain, or wait for God to do the work for him. And this is what the Jewish people did after the Holocaust.
You want to finish up, Carol?
3 years after standing eyeball to eyeball with the angel of death at Auschwitz, David Ben-Gurion proclaimed the Jewish state in our people's ancient homeland, the land of Israel. It was as if the Jewish people had said in the words of King David, I will not die but live. Here is a message for the world that Rabbi Sachs derives from Abraham, our survivors, and the values of the Jewish people. We survive tragedy and trauma, first build the future. Only then remember the past. As we conclude the week of Rabbi Sachs' yahrzeit, we can say with great confidence that his memory is truly a blessing to the Jewish people and all those who are privileged to continue learning from him through the wide and unique teachings he has left for all of us to live in.
So yeah, go ahead. I share this with you because I don't know if I agree with it.
Really?
Yeah,
So tell us why.
yeah, I'm gonna tell you in a minute. I'm gonna tell you in a minute, because I think I'm challenged by this.
When I hear this, what comes to mind is Rita Grunbaum.
Yeah.
Sitting next to Rita for 15 years at every Chevrah Torah session, I learned more from her than any other human being. And why is that?
So did I.
When I think about what she went through, and we talked about this in an open fashion, and how she was not only able to get through it, but thrive in what she did. It's a great lesson for all of us to take that experience. And it's almost laughable when you think about the bumps we have in our life compared to something like that. It's a joke. And yet here's this woman who was able to be a teacher, lift our spirits, and was a great.
That's exactly where I was gonna go. So, and she died old and contented, she would have told you, at 96. She would have told you, I died old and contented. And she did not have what, 100%. She hadn't lost anything.
I'll tell you one story about her also. 2 weeks before she died, we took her out to a restaurant. It was pouring cats and dogs. And she said, go right in front of the restaurant. We'll find a parking spot. As we pull up, a spot comes up. And I'm thinking to myself, how does she know this?
Well, that is old and contented. If you can get a parking spot. Right? I'll tell you why I have a problem with this. So Professor Wiesel, took him 4.5 years, 5 years really, before he could start writing, and the world stood by, which was his 898 page, book, his novel called, which eventually became 101 pages called Night. And I asked him, many students asked him, so why did you wait? He said, I didn't wait to do it. He said, I waited till the words came.
Yeah.
And at different points in time, he said, the first course I took with Professor Wiesel was a course of called Literature of Memory. And we each took one of his then 13 novels. He died with 48. And we talked about what it was for the first hour or so, and then he told us what it meant, where we had gone wrong. And I did Beggar in Jerusalem. And I had a question, and I went to him, and he said, Jeffrey, don't you understand? The Holocaust is in every one. The Kingdom of Night is in every one of my books. It's all, because I said, what? I was trying to relate why it begins with eyes and the nature of the character at the very beginning of the book. And he said, those are the eyes of the victims. And I said, oh. So I got what he was trying to tell us, which was, he didn't wait to build a future. He waited till he could integrate the past into his present.
Yeah.
And he used that to build a future. So when we lose something, we don't say, oh, we're gonna leave that behind, we're gonna go forge ahead. We say, how are we gonna, in a way that allows us to live and not be burdened, still take what we lost and take that legacy and use that to navigate our lives. Yeah.
So I think there are a number of us in this room who can really relate to, what is being said. And, I really do agree with what he's saying, what you're saying, is that, to find the future, you can't find the future until you kind of integrate it and make it part of your life and accept what has happened to find that future. You don't wake up one morning and say, okay, I'm gonna have a future. It doesn't work like that. You have to do a lot of grieving.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't come easily. For him, 4 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if
Yeah.
people can do 4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of us in this room really understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I brought in the Holocaust because of the time, but I think it's about all of our individual, losses and what that means and how we keep going, or how we can't keep going.
How we keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Steve and then Mike.
So in May, my daughter-in-law comes up and says to me, I'm pregnant. And so of course they start saying to me, what names do you like?
He said, I got one begins with M. That's a really good name.
So when I heard As Margie say, stay out of it.
Yeah.
I said, staying out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because, and in the past, if Margie was around, I would be giving them names.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, yeah, I hear you.
Why wouldn't you give a M?
Well, they already had the answer.
Oh,
Yeah,
there'll be an M in this one.
yeah, Steve, Mike.
I just wanted to say, as remarkable and humbling as survivor stories are, I think we have to be careful not to ignore the plight of the many more people who were unable
to
survive,
Yeah.
and who survived but were unable to lead any sort of a meaningful life.
Yeah.
Because they were so traumatized and so devastated.
Yeah, a couple of years
So
ago, yeah.
when we sort of exalt those remarkable individuals who really are so few among us who are able to transcend and to move on, there's a danger in ignoring the reality that afflicts just about everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say this, but you said it better than I could, so last comment. Maybe 2 years ago, we had a guy who was, he's the president, Michael something, he's president of Westchester, the commission, the Westchester Holocaust Commission. And he said, listen, he sent me a nutshell of his story, and he said, I'm gonna talk about my mother's mental illness and how she destroyed my family. Is that okay?
Wow.
And I said, sure. Because that's why I don't 100% agree with the student of Rabbi Sachs. It's not about first building the future. It's about trying to come to some terms that enable you to live with this very, very difficult past. And so I think that is where it's at. And I think it's with every loss. I agree with Hillary. Real last comment, gotta be quick.
And not to be too depressing, and what do you tell 1,400 families in Israel today?
Yeah, what do you tell, 4,000 lost children in the Palestinian, innocent Gazans? I think, by the way, notice, I don't have answers. I just have the questions, but you make me feel better because I am burdened to you, and then I get to go do today. Don't miss next week. There's going to be good food at the Shabbat services on Friday night, and we have a great koshi for Saturday morning. Shabbat shalom, guys. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Why aren't the Feinbergs here? I don't understand. What happened?
I don't know. We teletransferred.
Shabbat shalom.
We're there. Bye, everyone.
Shabbat shalom.
Bye. Shabbat shalom.
From where, I know, yeah, I know exactly.
There's like
Did you know?
I can follow it.
Across the street. To go sit in the park.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot,
Would die a long time. She was,
concentration camp.
No, I mean,
What's worse than the death of a child? We ended up going out for some day, and the parents were there, we were so exhausted.
Yeah, that's.
You can go like this. And my grandfather was very good physical mental condition. And when my mother died, he just went. No matter how old you are, and no matter how old you get, I don't think that's your problem. There's nothing wrong. Yes.
When they're mistreated.
Yes.
That's the hard.
Why would you say that? I mean, as opposed to anything else, as opposed to the guard.
I think this is the first time I was.
Good.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Oh.